The night pressed closer, heavy and alive, and from the height of the 7-meter stilt cabin, the rancher felt the desert breathing beneath him, every grain of sand whispering. Old warnings as the wind slid through creosote and dry mesquite, carrying with it the sharp, musky scent that made the hairs rise along his arms even before his eyes caught the movement at the edge of the firelight. A long, low shape gliding between shadows with a patience that spoke of hunger and confidence, the kind only a cougar carried when it knew it ruled this land. He had built the cabin high for floods and snakes, for bandits and flash storms, but tonight that height felt like a challenge thrown at the wild itself, a signal that had drawn the mountain lion closer, step by careful step, its shoulders rolling like liquid muscle, eyes catching the fire's glow in brief flashes of greenish gold. The rancher tightened his grip on the old rifle, not lifting it yet, knowing sudden moves could turn curiosity into attack, and he listened instead to the thud of his own heartbeat, to the scrape of claws on dry earth, to the faint creak of the stilts beneath his feet as the wind shifted. Memories crowded his mind. Stories told by old hands who said cougars didn't roar before they killed. They screamed, and the sound could freeze a man where he stood. And as if summoned by the thought, a low, rasping cry rolled across the desert. Not loud, but intimate, close enough to feel in the chest, close enough to know the animal was testing him, measuring the strange wooden tower and the man who refused to flee. He backed slowly toward the ladder opening, not to climb down, but to control the space, to make the cabin's height an advantage. And as he did, the cougar circled wider, tail flicking, head low, eyes never leaving him, calculating angles, distances, possibilities. A second shape appeared then, barely visible. Another set of eyes farther out in the dark, and the rancher's mouth went dry as he realized this wasn't a lone hunter but a pair. Perhaps a mother teaching a near-grown cub how to read prey, how to wait, how to strike. He chambered around with a deliberate click that echoed unnaturally loud, the sound slicing through the night like a challenge, and the nearer cougar froze, muscles bunching, ears flattening. Its body coiled in a way that made time stretch thin, every second pulled taut like wire. The rancher raised the rifle just enough to be seen, not aiming yet, letting the animal understand that this strange, upright creature could bite back from afar, and for a moment nothing moved at all. Desert and sky and man and beast locked in a silence so deep it felt sacred. Then the cougar screamed again, louder this time, a raw, ripping sound that seemed to tear at the stars themselves, and it sprang forward, not at him, but at the base of the cabin, slamming into one of the stilts with a force that rattled the entire structure, sending a shudder up through the wood and into his bones. He staggered, caught himself, and fired, not to kill but to warn, the shot cracking like thunder, the muzzle flash lighting the desert in stark white for a heartbeat that burned the image of the cougar mid-leap into his mind forever. The animal recoiled, skidding back into the dark, dust exploding around it, and the second set of eyes vanished instantly. But the first did not retreat far, only enough to reassess, to pace just beyond the firelight, tail lashing, head tilted, as if offended rather than afraid. The rancher reloaded with steady hands, forcing calm into his breathing, knowing this was not over, knowing that in the desert, challenges were rarely settled quickly. And as the fire crackled and the wind carried the cougar's scent back to him again, stronger now, closer again, he understood with a cold clarity that this night would decide who truly owned the land beneath that stilted cabin, and who would still be standing. When the sun finally rose, dawn did not arrive gently in the desert. It crept in like a survivor, pale and watchful, spilling thin light over the sand and revealing the scars of the night, the deep claw gouges, torn into the base of the stilts, the scattered ash from the fire, the looping tracks that told a story of patience, rage, and unfinished business. And from the height of the 7-meter cabin, the rancher stood, stiff and sleepless, eyes burning, body aching, knowing he had outlasted the darkness, but not yet won the war. Because cougars remembered, and the desert never forgot a challenge. As the sun lifted higher, heat rising fast, he descended the ladder slowly, rifle slung but ready, boots touching sand that still held the night's cold. And there it was again, the smell, faint but unmistakable, telling him the animals had not gone far, only withdrawn to watch, to learn. He spent the morning reinforcing the cabin, driving steel brackets into the stilts, stringing old tin and bone chimes that would sing at the slightest vibration, turning his home into a listening tower, every sound now an ally, every creak a warning. And while he worked, his thoughts stayed sharp, replaying the cougar's scream, the way it had struck the wood not to break it, but to test him, like a boxer tapping a guard before the real blow. By midday, the desert shimmered, cicadas buzzing, vultures circling high, and that was when he heard it again, not the scream, but the silence that fell before it. The sudden stillness that meant a predator was moving with intent. He climbed back up, heart hammering, and from the cabin's edge he saw them both clearly now, emerging from opposite sides of a dry wash, tawny bodies low, eyes locked on the ladder, on him, on the strange vertical prey that refused to behave like anything they knew. The younger one hesitated, but the larger cougar advanced, slow and confident, stepping into open ground. And when it screamed this time, it was not a warning, but a declaration, a claim laid bare under the burning sun. The rancher raised his rifle and aimed true, not at the body, but just ahead of it, calculating wind, distance, consequence, and he fired, the bullet striking sand in a violent burst that made the cougar leap back with a snarl, dust coating its whiskers, shock finally cracking that confidence. And in that moment the rancher shouted, not words, but a raw human sound pulled from deep in his chest, loud and defiant, echoing off the empty land, telling the desert and everything in it that he was not prey, not tonight, not ever. The younger cougar bolted then, instinct overpowering lesson, and the larger one lingered only a second longer, eyes burning with something like hatred before it turned and vanished into the rocks, leaving behind only tracks and a memory sharp as broken glass. The rancher stood there long after they were gone, rifle lowering slowly, hands trembling now that the danger had passed, and he looked out over the desert that had tried to claim him and failed, understanding that survival was not about domination but resolve, about meeting the wild on its own terms and refusing to bow. As evening came again, he lit the fire, not out of fear but ritual, a signal to the dark that he was still there, still watching. And as the stars returned one by one above his stilted cabin, he allowed himself a small, hard smile, knowing this story, this night, this stand, would live on long after the tracks were erased by wind. And if this story kept you on the edge of your seat, if you could feel the desert, hear the scream, and stand beside the rancher on that high cabin, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because more powerful survival stories, untamed deserts, and unforgettable battles between man and nature are coming, and you won't want to miss the next one.